Let's start with our discussion. So for today's discussion, I'll discuss module number 6. This is actually for our computer programming 11A, and module 6 talks about decision making using conditional statements. Now, let's go to your module here. This topic is all about control structures. Now, when we say control structures, these are the different sequence of executions of a group of statements in Java programming. Now, kaya siya tinawag na control structures. Again, it's a sequence. Kung napansin nyo, it's a sequence. It needs to be executed in a sequential fashion. And it has 3 different types of control structures. In Java, we have 3 different types. Number 1 is what we call the sequential control structure. When we say sequential control structure, from the word itself, sequence, that simply means we are actually trying to execute the program in a sequential manner from top to bottom. Kaya nga may tinatawag tayo na top-down. Okay, top-down in Java programming. Meaning, Java programming will actually execute the code based kung sino yung nauna. Organized such that statements are executed one after the other in the order of their appearance. That's what we call the sequential control structures. On the other hand, decision control structure, which is the main focus of our topic today, from the word decision, it is actually organized in such a way that there should be a condition to be evaluated first. Now, where are those conditions? Where can we find those conditions that we will be placing in our program? We actually were able to learn conditions in our module number 4. The behavior of the program will depend on the truthfulness of a condition being tested, whether it is true or false. Now, that is our topic for today, decision making. Ano yung tawag natin? Now, for the decision making, okay, we have here ayan. Decision-making structures have one or more conditions to be evaluated or tested by the program. Again, we have one or more conditions. Depende kung ano yung magiging problem natin. Decisions are made with a statement or statements that are to be executed if the condition is determined to be true. Otherwise, pwede mo ring execute yung statement mo if the condition is false. Let's try to take a look here at the flowchart. This is an example of a Java programming flowchart. The purpose of this one is for us to better understand the logic and the flow of your program. As simple as that. Now, it can be represented in the following ways. We have here symbols para mas maintindihan natin ang problems natin. I actually highly recommend everyone to start with symbols whenever you are creating a program that requires logic. Now, we have here circles. Circles represent the start and the end of the program. So as you can see, you have the start and you have an arrow. Arrow now represents the process or the sequence of the flow kung saan siya pupunta. Diamond represents any conditions, and it has 2 different directions, the true direction and the false direction. Kung napansin nyo dito, you have the condition. If the condition is true, you have here a rectangle. Rectangle represents the statement or the conditional code natin na tinatawag. So meaning, if the condition is true, it will execute the conditional code and will automatically terminate the program. If the condition, however, is false, it will automatically terminate the program. As simple as that. That is now an example of a decision-making flowchart na tinatawag natin. That's why we will be discussing the different types of conditional statements. First of all, we have here the if statement. Now, if statements provide the mechanism to perform one action when a Boolean evaluates as true. Now, based here, on the flowchart you are seeing, we have the start, we have the condition. If the condition is true, papasok yan dito sa statement. It will automatically execute this statement and will automatically be terminated. If the condition is false, nothing will happen. Automatic mag-e-end yung program. Now, let's go to our NetBeans. And kindly open your NetBeans or yung online Java compiler natin. Here, I have created a project named Conditional Statements. And also, I have created a package named Conditional Statements. And inside that, I have created a Java program named Conditional Statements.java. Now, let's start from the very beginning. First, I will create the public class, Conditional Statements. Again, alam naman natin ang rule dito that the class name should be the same with the file name. Conditional statements. Next is for us to make the main method. There you go. Now, for the sake of this class, kung napansin nyo may error pa because it's missing package. This is optional, pero nilagyan ko lang ito para mas makita natin sa NetBeans. Now, for the sake of this class, let's have a problem where the user will ask for input. Okay? And will now determine if the input is a positive number. Ayan. So, I hope in your module number 5, you were able to read the different types on how we accept inputs. Diba? We have 3. We have J-option pane, scanner, and buffered reader. Now, for the sake of this presentation purposes, I'll be using J-option pane. That's why I will be importing this package, import javax.swing. Kasi hindi naman lahat may PC at hindi rin lahat nakakakita nitong J-option pane na to. Kaya ito ang gagamitin natin. Okay, so this is the problem. The user will ask input and determine if the input is a positive number. So first, I will try to at least declare a variable name input. So, nag-declare ako ng variable na kung saan ilalagay ko yung value niya sa variable input. And I will now ask the user to input a number. So, I will use input and I will use the integer that parse int para makuha natin yung value ng input mo. Dito. Alright. Now, since this is J-option pane, I will use the following codes. J-option pane that show input dialog. Tapos, please enter a number. Let's try to run that. That is how it looked like. I hope you are following. So, kung napansin nyo, J-option pane actually provides us an output nakikita natin na may dialog box. Diba kagaya niyan? So, please enter a number. Now, the problem here, again, we will ask the user to input a number. So, if I enter 10, automatic number 10 will now be stored in the variable input. Yun yung mangyayari dyan. Dito. Okay. Next. Pasok tayo dito sa if statement. Again, it provides the mechanism to perform one action when a Boolean evaluates as a true. Kung napansin nyo, this is how you create your if statement. So, since we are trying to check if the input is a positive number, meaning for as long as the input is greater than 0, and I will now print a dialog box indicating the number is positive. Pero para merong ibang dialog box dito, let's add here J-option pane, show message dialog. And the number you have entered is input. Ayan. So let's try to check. I entered number 5, automatic. The number you have entered is 5. Now, since pumasok yan dito sa if statement, it will now try to evaluate if the input is greater than 0. If the input is greater than 0, this should be printed out. There you go. The number is positive. Diba? Now, meron pang kulang. Kasi after nating, ito yung condition. This is the conditional code. Ito yung conditional code. And the program will be terminated. Will now exit. Meaning, I will now try to create here a dialog box showing that the program is terminating. Yan. Tingnan natin. I entered 5. The number you have entered is 5. The number is positive. The program is terminating. Nagets ba natin ang if statement? As simple as that, diba? So you have here, I have declared a variable input, used a parser, an integer parse int, for us to gather or to store the value the user will input to the variable we have declared. Dito. Now we have printed that inputted number in a dialog box. Next is for us to evaluate if the input is a positive number. We have determined a condition that if a number is greater than 0, that is positive. And if yes, this will now execute and will now terminate. Yun yung tinatawag natin na if statement. Next is what we call the if-else statements. Dito tayo. So, it provides the mechanism to perform the expression evaluates as true and a different action when a Boolean expression as false. So, ibig sabihin, as you can see here, if ito ang nag-true, automatic pupunta yan dito. Pero if hindi yan nag-true, pupunta ngayon yun sa else. Dito. Now, let's take a look here. Start. It will evaluate the condition. If the condition is true, execute the if code and terminate. Otherwise, if the condition is false, execute the else code and will exit. Now, let's go back here to our code. It simply means that if we have entered a value greater than 0, pupunta yan dito. Now, using else statements, that will simply means that the number will be negative. As simple as that. Diba? So, if nag-enter ka ng value, anything that is greater than 0, papasok yan dito. And the program will now ignore this part. Papasok yun agad dito. However, if I entered negative 1, for example, it will evaluate this expression first. Pero since this is a false expression, hindi na yan papasok dito. But rather, yun yung purpose ng else. Papasok yan dito. Sa else. And ito yung mag-execute. Tapos yan na. Okay. Run file. I enter 5 or 85, let's say. The number you have entered is 85. The number is positive. The program is terminating. Diba? So, okay na. Pag negative 5, the number is negative, the program is terminating. Ayan. Nagets naman siguro natin ang if-else statements. Next, nested if statement. Alright, ito. Ang ibig sabihin ng nested if statements is actually if statements inside the if statement. Kaya yan tinawag na nested. Kasi nga, you can actually place another if statement inside an if statement. Now, say for example, yes, I entered a number that is positive. Pero gusto ko ring i-check yung number ba na yun saktong number 5, for example. If yes, Papasok yun ngayon dito sa show message dialog natin na nagsasabi the number is 5. Yun yung tinatawag natin na nested if statement. Ayan. Tignan natin ha. So, if I entered in number 5, papasok yun dito. The number you have entered is 5. The number is positive. Ayan o. Tapos, pumasok yan dito ngayon. It actually checked if the number is exactly 5. If yes, it will now print this one. The number is 5. And the program is terminating. Now, let's try to run the file again. Okay. Please enter a number. Let's say 7. It will evaluate this part. The number is positive. Yan. Pero, hindi magpapakita to kasi ayun. Yun yung tinatawag natin na nested if statement. Now, meron din tayong tinatawag na else if statement. Now, say for example, eto. Kasi kung napansin nyo dito sa code na to, kapag nag-enter tayo ng 0, question, saan papasok ang 0? Positive or negative? Based on the code. It will now proceed to this part of the code which is negative. Bakit kaya? Diba? Kasi nga, the input is 0. According here to our condition, if the input is greater than 0, so therefore, kasama ang 0 sa else statement. Diba? That's why we can actually convert this into what we call else if condition and specify another condition that says is if the input is less than 0, yan, the number is negative. I will now add another condition. If the input is exactly 0, on the other hand, I will now print it is 0. And I will also change the value of this one into 1 and into something like that. Ibig sabihin, if the input is greater than or equal to 1, well, technically, hindi naman kasama ang 0 as positive. If this is yes, papasok ngayon yan dito. And we'll terminate this one. However, if this resulted into a false value, it will automatically check if yung input mo ba is less than 0. If less than 0 yan, yes, papasok yan dito. And it will terminate. Next, kung ito nag-false pa rin, it will now check if the user has inputted a 0 as an exact value. If yes, papasok yan dito. Let's try to check. If I enter 10 or any positive numbers, there you go. The number is positive. The program is terminating. If I entered a negative value, for example, negative 5, the number you have entered is negative 5, the number is negative. The program is terminating. If I entered 0, it is 0. Nakuha nyo yung logic ng code natin? Diba? That is actually how if and else if statements work. Now, going back, nested if statement. Within an if-else statements, you can code as many dependent statements as you need, including other if and other else statements. And statements in which a decision is contained inside either the if or else clause of another decision are nested if statements. Now, punta tayo ngayon dito. Lagyan natin ngayon ng part ng problem or program. Say for example, if the number is positive, try to check if the number is within a range from 1 to 10. Ayan. So, Kung nag-positive yung number, i-check natin kung yung number na yun is within a range from 1 to 10. Diba? So, you can actually do that by using multiple if statements. So, pwede nyo gawing inside this input is greater than or equal to 1, pwede nyo gawing for as long as the input is equal to 1. Yan. Tapos, pwede ka na naman maglagay dito ng panibagong else if na equal to 2. Tapos, else if ulit equal to 3. Syntactically, this is correct. Pero logically and memory allocation wise, hindi siya pwede. Kasi medyo mas matagal siyang i-execute. Now, in order for us to determine the range of a specific number, say for example, ayan, from 1 to 10, I will now use what we call logical AND. Kasi gusto kong i-check yung range from 1 to 10. When I say logical AND, based from module 3 and 4, logical AND simply states that both of the conditions should be true para maging true yung value ng AND mo. So ibig sabihin, for as long as the input is greater than or equal to 1, and at the same time, the input is less than or equal to 10, I will now try to print a message here. It is in range from 1 to 10. Nagets ba natin? Ayan Kasi nga, iisipin mo ngayon, kung range, ibig sabihin, you will now try to think of a condition na dapat pareho silang magiging true. In this case, kapag nag-enter ka ng 0 kasi dito pa lang, yung 0, papasok na yan dito. Diba? Dito na yan papasok. Pero kung nag-enter ka ng 5, for example, it will execute this. It will print this, and will now go here. Okay? Tapos titignan niya, is the input greater than or equal to 1? Yes. And is the input less than or equal to 10? If pareho silang yes, automatic pupuntahin dito. If isa lang dito ang nag-yes, okay? If isa lang dyan ang nag-yes, false pa rin yung lalabas, papasok yun dito. G option pane. Show message dialog. Null, it is not in range. Yan siya. Let's try to evaluate. I'll enter a number 4. The number you have entered is 4. The number is positive. Pupuntahin ngayon dito. It is in range from 1 to 10. And the program is terminated. Pwede pa kayo maglagay. So for example, gusto mo pang maglagay ng panibago na from 11 to 20. Same pa rin ang process. Yan. Pag ganyan naman na siya. It is a range from 11 to 20. Ganyan siya. So you added if statement and you added an else if statement. Sir, pwede pa ba ako maglagay ng panibagong if or else statement inside that inner if statement? The answer is yes. Say for example dito. So kung nakita na ng code mo na nag-input nga ang user ng range from 1 to 10, gusto mo ulit tignan kung yung input niya is exactly number 5. Pwede ko ditong sabihin 5 yan, pre. Diba? Ganon din dito. If gusto ko bang makita na yung number na inano niya is exactly 10, pwede kong sabihin yan dito, 10 yan, tol. Diba? So, you can see, I can actually add multiple if and else statements inside an if statement which is currently inside another if statement. That is the power of nested if statement. Maybe you're wondering saan yan ginagamit. Di bale, sa mga next na activities natin, especially kapag may loops na, lalo at may array na tayo, tinatawag, mas maiintindihan nyo yan. Dire-diretso yan. Let's try to evaluate. If I entered a value of 0, ayan, it is 0, program is terminated. Dito yan pumasok. Inignore niya lahat to, kasi nga, the value is 0. Ito agad ang mag-execute. If the value is negative 5, in-ignore niya lahat ito, pasok yan dito. Diba? Now, if the value I entered is 8, pasok yan dito sa taas. The number is positive. It is in range from 1 to 10. The program is terminating. Hindi na nag-execute ito kasi technically hindi naman siya 5 or 10. Pero let's try to place here 10. It is positive. Range from 1 to 10. 10 yan tol. Ito mag-execute. And ignore lahat ito. Pasok dito sa terminating. Yan. Sana nagets natin yun, yung part na yun. Medyo mabilis, pero madali lang siyang intindihin because it's simply if else statements lang naman siya. Okay? Next, going back, let's go here to what we call the switch statements. A switch statement allows a variable to be tested for equality against a list of values. Now, based on what you are seeing here, you have a condition. Now, hindi true or false yung condition. This time, it's in case. You have multiple cases, and each case represents a code block or a statement to be executed if that case was actually resulted into a true value. Otherwise, papasok yun sa ibang case and will exit the program. If none of the cases were executed or resulted into a true value, the expression will go to the default and will execute the code or the statement inside the default block. Now, let's take a look here sa dito sa sa module natin. Now, as you can see, the module naman, I actually intended or designed the module in such a way na kahit na halimbawa yon may mga times na hindi ako nakakapagklase, it's because of my internet connection, you can still actually learn how to code by simply reading and trying each of the following programs na nilalagay ko. Yun yung kagandahan nito eh. At least pwede nyo pa rin siya mapag-aralan. Kasi nga, pwede yung kayo mismo ang nagtatry ng code na yon. Now, let's try to take a look here and analyze this one. This sample program here simply prompt the user to input a number from 1 to 7. And after inputting from 1 to 7, it actually tries to check if that number from 1 up to 7, if that number is a Monday up to Sunday. Pero using switch case. Okay, umpisahan natin yan dito. Tanggalin ko to para makita natin kung paano yan ginawa. Yan. Sabihin natin day yan. Day na rin yan. Please enter a number, tapos 1 to 7. Now, using switch case, pwede nyo gamitin to. Kasi, kapag hindi nyo gagamitan yan ng switch case, ang mangyayari dyan, if day is equal to 1, if day is equal to 2, if day is equal to 3, and so on. Tama? Pero using switch statements, as you can see, switch. Now, inside the switch statement is the variable you would like to evaluate. In this case, the switch here is the day. So, yung day natin is an integer. So, what are the possible inputs from 1 to 7? Therefore, those are the different cases. So, if the case number 1, or if the user input a value of 1, it will now print, a message, the day is Monday. Now, I will add break. That simply means when we say break, you are getting out of the entire program. Or, of the entire switch case block. Ganun siya. Now, I will also add a default value. Ibig sabihin, kapag default value, gusto ko na halimbawa yung user ay pilosopo, nag-enter ng number ng 8, nagkamali siya or pilosopo lang siya, invalid input. Tapos break. Ganun siya. Diba? Let's try to run that. If I entered 1, the day is Monday, pero hindi na mag-execute ito because there is a break. Ayan na. Diba? So, pwede ko ngayon ilagay dito, the option pane that show message dialog null, the program is terminating. Ganon. Diba? So, again, if I entered 1, the day is Monday, the program is terminating. If I entered a value that is not present in the case, for example, 2, invalid input, and the program is terminating. That's the output. Kaya, ang gagawin ko dyan, maglalagay ako ng case number 2, that is Tuesday, case number 3, that is Wednesday, case number 4, that is Thursday, case number 5, that is Friday. Yaman na yung 6 and 7. So that is actually how your switch case works. Nagets ba natin? So you are trying to evaluate the variable na dineclare mo dito. Kung ano yung variable mo, yun din yung case value na ilalagay mo. Kaya nga 'di ba, sabi dito sa may ito, there are different rules in switch statements. The variable used in a switch statement can only be integers, convertible integers such as byte short characters, strings, and enums. Ibig sabihin, ito, let's try to modify this one in such a way na hindi number yung enter the user. Tanggalin ko lahat. Gusto kong i-enter ni user is a string value. String day naman. Yan. So, since it is a string, I don't need to use a parser. I will only use directly to the show input dialog, enter a day. Ayan. Ayan, enter a day. So, meaning, ang enter natin dyan, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's it. Now, let's try to use switch case. For switch, we are now evaluating the day variable, pero since this is in a string, ayan o, the case should now look something like this. Since it's a string, we all know that a string will be enclosed in two, okay, in two, what do you call that one? Open and, ano yung quotation? Oh, yun, quotation. Ganun na siya. If the case is Monday, if the case is Monday, I will now place here it is Monday. If the case you have entered is Tuesday, nakalimutan ko yung break. Yan. It is Tuesday. And the default, for example, nagkamali ka ng spelling, I will now place here something, or I mean a default lang na ganyan. Invalid. And so on. Tapos ito, Wednesday. It is Wednesday. This is Thursday. This is Friday. Yan. Oops, bakit debugger? Ayan. Enter a day. If I entered Monday, there you go. Pasok sa program is terminating. Ganun siya. If I entered something that is not in the case, invalid. Program is terminating. Nagets ba natin? That is actually how your switch case work. Ayan, no? So, kung ano yung, tandaan mo ha. Alright. So, paano kung capital letters yung in-enter? That's a good question. Now, let's try to take a look. If the input is a capital letter, for example, Monday, what do you think? Tignan natin kung anong evaluate ni Java. The program will still evaluate the default value. Tandaan natin ha, ang Java programming case sensitive po yan. Napaka-case sensitive yan. So, kung gusto mo ang user is mag-input din ng kumbaga ng yan, capital letters, kailangan mo ng panibago dito. Na capital letters lahat. Kailangan mo rin ulit ng panibago dito na small letters lahat. Okay? Pero kung ganyan ang kaso, na multiple pala multiple pala ang gusto mong i-evaluate and capital letter yung first, capital letters lahat, tapos small letters lahat, I actually prefer na hindi tayo gumamit ng switch case, but rather we can actually use if-else statements. Tapos inside the if statement here is something like this. If the day since string yan, ganyan na yan. If the day that equals to Monday, tapos may or ka ulit yan na the day dot equals to, yan, yung capital lang na ganyan, and or if the day that equals Monday na small letters, ganyan yung mangyayari dyan. Kaysa sa switch mo ilalagay na tatlo-tatlo ang i-evaluate mo. Kapag if, you can actually place the three conditions into one single line using or statements, because you are actually trying to check for as long as the user input the word Monday, regardless kung ano yung yan, kung capital ba siya or small caps. Ayan. So at least we all know that switch cases are really case sensitive as well. Okay? Another question. May question pa ba? That's a good question, Mr. Kurt. Basahin natin to. You can have any number of case statements, which is nagawa naman natin, di ba? Within a switch. Each case is followed by the value to be compared to and a colon. Sarap ng kape. Next, the value for a case must be the same data type as the variable in the switch. Alam naman na natin yan. So, kung ang data type nito is string, yan, automatic, the case value should be string. When the variable is being switched on is equal to a case, the statement following that case will execute until a break statement is reached. Again, to reiterate po, the break statement, the purpose of this one is to get out of the entire switch case. Okay? Is to get out. Kasi ang mangyayari dyan usually kapag meron ka pa ditong panibagong code, halimbawa, meron ka pa dito na, kung wala yan, tapos meron ka pa dito na ganyan, panibagong ganyan, kung walang break yan dito, mag-execute pa rin yan. Ganun ang mangyayari. The reason why we have placed here a break statement is obviously for us to break the switch case statements. Diba? Kaya nga tignan natin to. Etong, asan to? Ito, ayun o. Input month. Ayan, yung month naman, if you entered 3, it is winter. Tapos break, aalis na, hindi na mag-execute lahat yan. So, pwede ka palang maglagay ng case value without actually trying to do something. It's possible. When a break statement is reached, the switch terminates and the flow of control jumps to the next line following the switch statement. Yun yung sinasabi ko kanina. Kung kung na-reach to, automatic, papasok yan, or automatic magbe-break na yan dito. Not every case needs to contain a break. Tandaan nyo yan. Pwede nyo tanggalin yan kung gusto nyo meron pang i-print na panibago. If no break appears, the flow of control will fall through a subsequent cases until a break is reached. Tandaan nyo, until a break is reached. A switch statement can have an optional default case, can have, meaning optional lang din yan. Kahit wala yan, okay lang. Which must appear at the end of the switch. The default case can be used for performing a task when none of the cases is true. No break is needed in the default case. Actually, hindi ko masyadong ginagamit ang switch case statements. Especially kapag meron na yung loops. I still prefer using if statements. Honestly, with you guys. Kaya nga kung napansin nyo rin dito sa program na sa site work natin, we have a 6 problems here. 5 points each po yan. You will create a program for the following using if-else statement. Maybe you're asking a question, sir, can I use else if? Yes, possible po yan. Okay? Now, let's try to take a look at number 1. It will accept an integer value. Take note. The program or the problem is actually giving you a clue kung anong klaseng variable or anong klaseng data type agad ang gagamitin nyo. Accept an integer value. That means you are using an int. Tapos iba lang yung variable ninyo. And thereafter display whether the number is odd or even number. The question here is that how are you going to determine if the number is an odd number and an even number? Paano nga ba? That is actually a problem. Pero just to give you a clue, you will be using a modulo. Kasi for as long as the modulo of a number is something, basta yun, madidetermine nyo kung odd yan or even. For number 2, you will ask the user to input 1 or 0. If the input value is 1, the program should display true. Otherwise, displays false. Easy yan, kaya-kaya nyo na yan. Number 3, ask the user to input an integer value representing the day in the week. Yun, yung parang example ko lang din dyan sa module. Just like in the previous program problem, assume that 1 represents Monday, and so on. Kung binabasa nyo maigi yung module, ayan, actually, nandun na rin sa module yan. Ask the user to input a letter. Ito, this is actually somehow a challenge. Ask the user to input a letter. If the user entered a lowercase letter, display the words lowercase. Otherwise, display the word uppercase. Medyo mahaba-haba ba yan? Actually, pwede nyong gamitan yan ng if. Yeah, if tapos logical or statements. Tapos since letter yan, ibig sabihin, alam naman natin ang letter is car. Diba? Car letter. Kaya ang mangyayari dyan, ang input mo is, ang output mo, since car yan, ganito ang itsura niyan kapag car. Ganyan. So, ibig sabihin, if letter is equal to ganyan, that's it. Diba? Pero, sabi dito, if, asan yun? Ito. if the user entered a lowercase letter, it displays the word lowercase. Now, let me give you a clue for this one. Did you know, guys, that each particular letter in the alphabet, including the space, it actually can give you a particular amount of value. So, for example, halimbawa, yung A na yan, meron yung specific na value na pwede nyong gamitin. Diba? Yung, tanggalin ko na muna to. So, if I run letter, my letter A. Pero, you can actually use what we call the typecasting method. Where, tingnan nyo ha, typecasting. Meaning, ewan ko kung na-introduce ko ang typecasting. Hindi ko pala na-introduce. Pero, for you guys to have an idea, typecasting is actually a method in Java where you will try to at least convert the data type into another data type. In this case, we have a letter variable which has a data type of car, and I actually determined the value of the letter A in small caps and determine its integer value. In this case, a value niya pala 97. So ibig sabihin, pag capital A, 65. So pasok tayo sa small a, it's 97. Pag small b, it's 98. Pag small c, it's 99. So ano nakikita niyong pattern dito? I hope you are seeing the pattern. Pag space, it's number 32. Kapag yung mga symbols nyo like 1, it's 49. Now, that is actually what we called hexacodes. ASCII pala, sorry. ASCII codes. Now, if you try to take a look sa Google natin and try to type ASCII table, dito tayo sa images. And let's go here. Yan. American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Now, kung napansin nyo, ano ba to? Ito na lang pala. Ayan. Very good. Now, kung napansin nyo, dito tayo sa character. Ito. The different characters here can be now represented into its corresponding decimal values. Or, hindi ko kasi diniscuss to kasi sa pang-college daw yan, kaya wag daw muna. Pero decimal simply means integer. Diba? So, each character in your keyboard represents into its specific decimal value or integer value. Now, character A, small letter A, is 97. Diba? So, meaning, from letter A up to Z, from 97 to 122. So, I hope you are getting my thought here in such a way na, ibig sabihin, if I entered a, kasi imbis na gawin nyo if letter is A or letter is B and so on, what if you convert first your character value into its corresponding integer value? Parang ginawa ko dito, ginawa ko muna siyang typecasting. Typecast ko muna siya. Diba? So what if ganun? Including space, yan, carriage return, cancel, escape, meron siyang value and space. Diba? So, I'm actually giving you a clue how to answer this part here. Ask the user to input, number 5, ask the user to input the last digit in his car plate, and thereafter, the program will display what day is prohibited for him to use his car. Ito, coding. Ano ang coding ng sasakyan natin? Vehicle Coding Philippines. Tingnan natin kung anong number coding natin. Pero, yan o. Diba? So, ibig sabihin, if the vehicle plate number ends in 1 or 2, there are prohibited every Monday. Pag 3 and 4, Tuesday. Pag 5 and 6, Wednesday, and so on. So, in order for you to answer this one, you have to determine kung kailan ang number coding natin sa Baguio. Diba? Madali lang yan. You've been hired as a programmer by SFT, a mobile telecommunications company. You are to write a program that will ask the user to input the number of text messages involved in SFT cell phone. User to input the number of text messages. Take note, ha? The text messaging charge is then computed based on the number of text messages. Ayan. The charge is 0 for the first 200 message. Take note. The charge is 0 for the first 200 message. Text messages beyond that would be charged by 0.5 peso per message. So meaning, if the user entered 200, that means ang value is ang value pa rin is 0. Pero kapag nag-enter na tayo ng 201, the value will now be 0.5 per message. And so on. Now, the question here, for example, I entered a value of 500. Kasi sabi, user to input the number of text messages. So, if I entered 500, magkano ngayon pag 500 messages na? Given the fact that the number of messages will now be charged as 0.5 after the 200 message. Ito yung medyo challenge naman sa lahat. So, ito, may logic na tinatawag. So, if I were you, I will create a flowchart and I will represent each variables into something. Mangyayari dyan, i-check muna, is the value less than 200? Less than or equal to 200? If yes, yon. If no, check mo ngayon kung ilan na yung number, ilan na yung text message na input, multiply it by the number of, basta something like that. Okay? May question ba tayo? O, sakto. Sabi ko na nga ba, 1 oras eh. Ay, hindi. Wala pa lang 1 oras, sabi ko. Ayan, may question pa ba tayo? Alright, mukhang wala naman na tayong question. So, I hope you actually learn something new today, especially sa if-else statement. It is a foundation for the next parts kasi, kaya I really have to discuss this one. Kahit na medyo, yun lang, wala akong madala sa internet, pero mabawi naman. Okay? So, kindly stay there. My system is currently checking your attendance.